What if some of the people you keep rescuing do not need more help? They need the responsibility you keep taking away from them. Think about it. The telephone rings, and once again you abandon your priorities to manage another person's crisis. They miss an obligation, and you repair the damage. They make the same careless decision, and you absorb the cost. They become distressed, and suddenly their emergency becomes your assignment. You call this kindness. Others call you dependable. But a virtue without wisdom can become destructive. Now, understand me clearly. This is not an argument for selfishness. It is not permission to ignore genuine emergencies, abandon vulnerable people, or become cold toward human need. Compassion is necessary. Community is necessary. Service is necessary. But compassion must walk with discernment, or your desire to help can weaken the very person you are trying to strengthen. Every rescue creates an exchange. You receive appreciation, approval, and temporary relief because the crisis has been silenced. But what does the other person lose? They lose the opportunity to choose. They lose the necessity to act. They lose the lesson carried by consequence. They lose the chance to discover that they are capable of carrying responsibility. That is the rescue trap. The rescue trap begins when you repeatedly assume ownership of problems that belong to somebody else. Eventually, their irresponsibility becomes your schedule. Their lack of preparation becomes your pressure. Their repeated choices consume your time and energy. And because society applauds helpful people, this pattern can look noble while it is quietly becoming a socially rewarded form of self-neglect. Healthy help strengthens responsibility. Unhealthy rescue replaces responsibility. Healthy help says, I will stand with you while you take the next step. Rescue says, move aside, I will take the step for you. One develops capacity, the other develops dependence. One honors potential, the other unintentionally buries it. And remember this, every responsibility you take from another person becomes additional weight upon your own life. Your purpose now competes with their crisis. Your priorities wait while their pattern continues. Your assignment is delayed while you manage obligations you were never given. So the question is not simply, did I help? The deeper question is, did my help make this person stronger, or did it make my presence more necessary? But if rescuing exhausts intelligent, caring people and weakens those they love, why do they continue doing it? Because beneath the visible sacrifice, there is often an invisible reward. And that invisible reward can be powerful. Rescuing often survives because it pays the rescuer before it changes the person being rescued. It gives you gratitude. It gives you importance. It gives you a place in the relationship. For a moment, you feel indispensable because somebody needed what only you seemed willing to provide. Over time, that feeling can become an identity. You become the reliable one, the strong one, the fixer, the person everybody calls when life falls apart. You may complain about carrying everyone, yet quietly fear what would happen if they learned to carry themselves. Who would you be if nobody needed saving? There is a difference between being useful and needing to be needed. Being useful serves purpose. Needing to be needed serves identity. Being useful contributes and releases. Needing to be needed intervenes and remains. And when your sense of worth depends on another person's weakness, their growth can begin to feel like your loss. Now consider another reward, immediate relief. Watching someone struggle can be uncomfortable. Watching them face disappointment can be painful. Watching them experience the consequences of their choices can make you feel cruel, even when you did not create the problem. So you rush in, remove the pressure, and call the resulting peace compassion. But whose peace did you restore? Sometimes you solve their problem because you cannot tolerate your own discomfort. Their crisis ends, but so does their opportunity to develop. You feel better, they remain unprepared. Guilt strengthens the pattern. You tell yourself, if I can help, I must help. You assume that another person's disappointment means you have failed. You confuse capacity with responsibility, as though possessing strength obligates you to carry every weight you can see. Meanwhile, people praise your generosity. They admire your sacrifice. They celebrate how much you do for everyone else. But they do not always see the promises you keep postponing, the rest you keep surrendering, the preparation you keep neglecting, or the priorities that receive only what remains of you. So examine your motives without condemning your heart. If nobody thanked you, admired you, or depended upon you, would you still believe this intervention belonged to you? If helping produced no applause, would you offer the same kind of help in the same way? Compassion and approval seeking can perform the same action, but they do not produce the same fruit. Compassion strengthens. Approval seeking entangles. You do not need to stop caring. You need clarity about what is driving your care. And once the motive is exposed, emotion can no longer avoid the decisive question: whose responsibility is this problem? Need is not the same as assignment. You can see a problem without owning it. You can possess the skill to solve it without being responsible for the outcome. You can care deeply about a person without carrying every decision attached to their future. Maturity requires ownership. Each person must learn to carry the responsibilities connected to their choices, commitments, development, and direction. If you continually carry what belongs to someone else, you may lighten their day while weakening their life. This is why you must learn to separate problems into 4 categories. First, there are responsibilities that belong to you. These require your discipline and action. Second, there are responsibilities that belong to another person. These may deserve your concern, but not your control. Third, there are genuinely shared responsibilities where both people must communicate and contribute. Fourth, there are emergencies that require temporary intervention because immediate protection matters. Confusion begins when a temporary intervention becomes a permanent arrangement, or when another person's responsibility is repeatedly treated as your own. Before you step in, ask, who made this commitment? Who controls the choices creating the outcome? Who receives the lasting benefit? Who should take the next step? And who must eventually sustain the solution when I am no longer present? Those questions reveal ownership. Support and substitution are not the same. Support adds strength while keeping the owner involved. Substitution removes the owner and makes the helper responsible for progress. Support says, I will help you think. Substitution says, I will decide for you. Support provides a tool. Substitution performs the task. Support leaves responsibility visible. Substitution makes responsibility disappear. Now, not every hardship is self-created. People can encounter loss, injustice, illness, rejection, and circumstances they did not choose. Compassion must recognize that truth. But even when people are not responsible for what reached them, they must eventually become responsible for how they respond, what they learn, and what they build next. Love does not require you to prevent every struggle. Some struggles develop initiative. Some disappointments sharpen judgment. Some difficult decisions build discipline. Some responsibilities teach a person, I can direct my life. I can keep my word. I can act without being carried. If you interrupt every struggle, you may also interrupt the development hidden inside it. So remember the governing formula. Compassion notices the need, wisdom identifies the owner, and integrity respects the difference. Do not let emotion turn every visible problem into a personal mandate. Ask what belongs to you, what belongs to them, what must be shared, and what requires only temporary aid. Once ownership becomes clear, another truth must be confronted. What happens when the rightful owner is repeatedly protected from the consequences connected to that responsibility? Consequences are not always enemies. Sometimes they are teachers. A consequence can reveal that preparation was inadequate, a promise was neglected, a decision was careless, or a pattern must change. It gives information. It connects choice to outcome. But when you repeatedly rescue someone before that connection becomes clear, you interrupt the lesson while preserving the behavior that created it. They miss an obligation, and you cover it. They spend without a plan, and you supply more money without requiring a different approach. They neglect the work, and you finish it. They damage a relationship, and you become the messenger, negotiator, and repairer while they avoid the conversation. Watch the cycle carefully. A choice creates pressure. The pressure produces discomfort. You absorb the pressure, the discomfort disappears. No new behavior is required. Then the same crisis returns wearing a different date. That is not resolution. That is repetition with assistance. Now, compassion should never become cruelty. You do not manufacture pain to teach people lessons. You do not celebrate their hardship. You do not withhold necessary aid merely to prove a point. But neither are you required to erase every consequence before it can produce reflection, correction, and responsible action. This is where discernment must become stronger than emotion. Stop evaluating the relationship only by what the person says during the crisis. An apology may express a sincere intention, but a pattern reveals whether responsibility is growing. Words tell you what someone hopes to do. Repeated choices show you what they are practicing. So ask better questions. Do they receive correction or resist it? Do they initiate repair or wait for you? Do they prepare differently after failure or create the same emergency again? Are they carrying more of the responsibility over time, or are you carrying more? A single mistake may require mercy and support. A rescue system is different. In a rescue system, every incident is called unusual, even though the pattern is familiar. Every promise sounds new, even though the outcome remains old. Every urgent request pressures you to forget what happened before. When you keep treating a pattern as an exception, both people learn the wrong lesson. The other person learns that sufficient urgency will produce your intervention. You learn that surrendering your boundary will relieve your guilt. Their avoidance is rewarded, and your rescuing is reinforced. Refusing to cancel every consequence is not the withdrawal of love. It can be an expression of respect. It says, I believe you can face reality. I believe you can make a decision. I believe you can repair what belongs to you. Real compassion does not merely remove pain. It protects potential. And sometimes potential develops only when responsibility and consequence are allowed to meet. But repeated rescue creates more than dependence in the person being helped. It can bind both people together, one identified by needing rescue, the other identified by providing it. Dependency can work in both directions. One person becomes dependent on being rescued, the other becomes dependent on being essential. One says, I cannot manage without you. The other quietly needs to hear it. And what appears to be loyalty becomes an arrangement that keeps both people from growing. The rescuer begins to live ahead of the next crisis. You remind before anyone asks. You monitor decisions that are not yours. You anticipate mistakes, prepare solutions, and intervene before the responsible person has made a serious attempt. You call it being helpful, but your constant involvement may be teaching them that you trust your ability more than theirs. Then resentment enters. You keep saying yes with your mouth, while something inside you is saying no. You feel used, overlooked, and trapped. Yet you continue the pattern because ending it might produce conflict. Your generosity remains visible, but your frustration grows in secret. Eventually, you are angry at them for accepting what you repeatedly volunteer to provide. Imagine a capable relative who continually neglects an important obligation. Each time the deadline arrives, another family member rearranges everything, makes the calls, completes the work, and protects them from the outcome. The helper says, this is what family does. The relative says, I knew you would understand. But look again, is that loyalty or is it a system? The same person neglects. The same person repairs. The same person apologizes. The same person returns. Nothing changes except the date of the crisis. Hidden fears keep the arrangement alive. The rescued person may fear effort, failure, embarrassment, or consequence. The rescuer may fear rejection, irrelevance, confrontation, or the loss of approval. One avoids the responsibility of acting. The other avoids the discomfort of stepping back. And when a relationship becomes organized around dysfunction, improvement can feel threatening. If the rescued person becomes responsible, an excuse disappears. If the rescuer stops intervening, a special role disappears. Both must then discover who they are without the crisis connecting them. This is why control can wear the clothing of care. When you decide what another capable person should do, perform the action for them, and carry the outcome they should own, you are no longer merely supporting them. You are governing a life that was not entrusted to you. Dignity requires a different relationship. The person being rescued must stop outsourcing maturity. The rescuer must stop building identity upon another person's dependence. One must learn to act. The other must learn to release. One must face responsibility. The other must survive no longer being indispensable. Compulsive helping can preserve a relationship pattern that neither person can outgrow until responsibility is returned to its rightful owner. And once you see this relational system clearly, you must widen the lens. What has maintaining this pattern been costing your own assignment? The cost is greater than inconvenience. It is the slow diversion of your life. Your time is limited. Your attention is limited. Your energy, talents, relationships, and opportunities must be managed with intention. They are resources entrusted to you, not an endless supply available to every person who creates a demand. Every unexamined yes contains a hidden no. Yes to another preventable crisis may mean no to preparation. Yes to another task that was not yours may mean no to rest. Yes to repairing someone else's repeated neglect may mean no to your family, your focused work, your spiritual development, or a promise you already made. You cannot give the same hour twice. This is why activity must never be confused with diligence. Diligence is directed effort. It knows the assignment, orders the priorities, and works with consistency. Rescue is reactive effort. It runs wherever urgency shouts the loudest. It may leave you exhausted, but exhaustion is not proof of alignment. You can be busy and still be distracted. You can be generous and still be unfaithful to your priorities. You can become dependable to every crisis while becoming unreliable to the purpose that requires your concentration. That is the tragedy of overload. You answer everybody, but you cannot hear your own assignment. You keep their commitments, but break promises to yourself. You arrive for their emergencies, but remain absent from the work only you can do. Integrity requires honesty about capacity. If your mouth keeps saying yes, while your calendar, energy, and existing commitments are saying no, something is out of alignment. A promise you cannot sustain is not greater love. Eventually, it becomes delay, resentment, poor work, or failure. So examine the evidence. Look at your calendar. Which priorities are continually displaced? Look at your unfinished commitments. Whose responsibilities have consumed the time intended for them? Look at the interruptions that repeat, the exhaustion that never resolves, and the relationships in which you are always solving but nobody else is growing. Then ask the stewardship question. Is my strength multiplying responsibility, or is it financing avoidance? That question will expose purpose leakage. Your assignment may not have disappeared. It may simply be buried beneath obligations you accepted without discernment. Your potential may not be absent. It may be scattered across problems you were never meant to own. Boundaries protect contribution. They keep your strength available for the people, responsibilities, and opportunities that truly belong to your purpose. The goal is not to become less generous. The goal is to stop spending your life on patterns that produce dependence instead of development. Unhealthy help consumes two futures. It delays the growth of the person being rescued and drains the assignment of the person doing the rescuing. So now we must define a better form of compassion, one that preserves your purpose while restoring the other person's power to act. The best help does not merely end a crisis. It develops a person. Effective help has direction. It moves someone toward responsibility, clarity, and independent action. If your assistance continually removes discomfort but never increases capacity, you may be providing relief without producing growth. There are several ways to help without taking over. You can offer attentive presence and listen without immediately becoming the solution. You can offer clarifying wisdom that helps the person see choices and consequences. You can provide a useful tool, resource, introduction, or opportunity. And when practical assistance is necessary, you can make it limited, specific, and connected to a clear endpoint. Before you act, ask questions. What have you already tried? What part of this belongs to you? What decision can you make now? What contribution from me would help without transferring ownership? Questions require the other person to think. Rescuing often begins when you answer questions they have not yet wrestled with, make decisions they have not yet considered, and perform actions they have not yet attempted. There is a difference between doing something for a capable person and equipping that person to do it. Advice still requires their decision. A tool still requires their use. An opportunity still requires their initiative. If they refuse the responsibility attached to the help, your effort cannot manufacture maturity for them. Return to the capable relative who repeatedly neglected an obligation. Previously, the helper rearranged the schedule, made the calls, and completed the work. Now the response changes. The helper offers one planning conversation. They share one appropriate resource. They agree to a brief check-in at a specific time. But the responsible person must make the call, complete the task, communicate progress, and carry the outcome. Will that person feel uncomfortable? Probably. They may hesitate, they may complain, they may even perform poorly at first. But discomfort is not always proof that the boundary is wrong. Sometimes discomfort means an unused ability is finally being exercised. A weak muscle does not become strong because another body keeps lifting its weight. So require a visible transfer of agency. Let the person name the next action. Let them perform it. Let them report what happened. Let them adjust their approach. Let them experience the confidence that comes from keeping a commitment without being carried. This is compassion with purpose. You remain present without becoming permanent. You contribute without controlling. You support the person while refusing to replace them. Rescuing makes the helper increasingly necessary. Empowering help makes the other person increasingly capable. That is the test. Your goal is not to become the engine of someone else's life. It is to help them start using the capacity already entrusted to them. Now, this principle must become practical. Before guilt, urgency, or pressure makes the decision for you, you need a repeatable framework for deciding when to help, how much to give, and where your responsibility ends. Before you answer the next request, pass it through 4 filters. The first filter is ownership. Ask, whose responsibility is this? Is it yours because of a commitment you made? Does it belong to the other person because they control the relevant choices? Is it genuinely shared, or has responsibility been temporarily transferred to you by an emergency or a clearly defined role? Do not begin with emotion. Begin with ownership. The second filter is consequence. Ask, what will my intervention prevent? Will it prevent serious harm, or will it merely prevent discomfort? There is a difference. Serious harm may require immediate action, but discomfort may be the pressure that inspires preparation, honesty, repair, or change. Do not treat every unpleasant outcome as a disaster. The third filter is capacity. Ask, can I help without violating what is already entrusted to me? Measure the request against your time, emotional strength, finances, competence, relationships, and existing promises. Then ask whether your involvement could be sustained if this request became a pattern. A generous decision that destroys your stability is not wise stewardship. The fourth filter is agency. Ask, will this help require the other person to participate? Will they think, decide, act, communicate, and eventually continue without you? If your assistance leaves them passive while making you permanently responsible, it is not empowerment, it is replacement. These filters lead to 3 possible answers. Sometimes the answer is a wholehearted yes because responsibility, need, and capacity are aligned. Sometimes the answer is a limited yes. I can help with this part until this time, while you remain responsible for the next step. And sometimes the answer must be a respectful no because intervention would replace responsibility or violate your assignment. Wisdom is not saying no to everything. Wisdom is knowing what your yes is for. If someone is in immediate danger, act. If a vulnerable dependent is entrusted to your care, fulfill that duty. If your role makes the responsibility yours, do not hide behind the language of boundaries, but do not allow an exception to become a permanent system. Acute help should move towards stable ownership whenever possible. If a person is facing immediate danger, rescue is appropriate. If 2 people share an obligation, cooperation is required. But if a capable person repeatedly creates the same preventable crisis and expects you to absorb it, return the responsibility with clarity. Remember the framework. Identify the owner, respect the lesson, count the cost, and protect the person's power to act. This standard is firm enough to resist manipulation and flexible enough to preserve compassion. But knowing the framework is easier than applying it. The real test begins when a long-standing rescue system meets a clear boundary and the people who benefited from your old yes begin resisting your new one. Expect discomfort. A new boundary can feel wrong simply because overextension has felt normal for so long. When you have trained yourself to respond immediately, any pause feels selfish. When you have built relationships around availability, a limit feels like betrayal. But unfamiliar does not mean immoral, and another person's disappointment does not automatically mean you have failed. You must distinguish conviction from conditioned guilt. Conviction points to a genuine responsibility you have neglected. It produces clarity and directs you toward repair. Conditioned guilt demands compliance whenever someone is unhappy with your decision. It produces anxiety, confusion, and the urge to surrender your judgment just to restore approval. When the old rescue system is interrupted, resistance may come. Someone may call you selfish. They may exaggerate the urgency. They may withdraw affection, bargain repeatedly, or suddenly make promises after refusing responsibility for months. Do not be shocked. People often resist the loss of access before they accept the return of ownership. Your task is not to become angry. Your task is to become clear. Do not deliver a long defense. Do not counterattack. Do not list every sacrifice you have ever made. A clean boundary is calm, brief, specific, and consistent. Express care. State the limit. Name what help is available. Define where it ends. Return the next action to its owner. You can say, I care about what happens, but I cannot take this over. I can help you consider the options and the next decision remains yours. Or say, I can assist with this one part today, but I cannot become responsible for the entire outcome. Then stop explaining. Repetition does not make a clear answer more truthful. Watch what happens next. A person who is moving toward responsibility may feel disappointed, but they begin adapting. They ask better questions. They make a plan. They take initiative. Entrenched dependence behaves differently. It searches for another argument, another emergency, another person, or another route back to the old arrangement. Begin your reset practically. Audit the rescues that keep repeating. Choose one responsibility to return. Write the boundary before the next crisis arrives. Rehearse the words so pressure does not erase your clarity. Start with one small limit. Then review the pattern each week. Most importantly, remain consistent. A boundary announced today and abandoned tomorrow teaches people that your convictions can be overruled by persistence. Consistency trains them to respect your limit, and it trains you to trust your own decisions. You can withstand guilt without becoming cold. You can endure disappointment without becoming cruel. You can remain compassionate without surrendering responsibility. But lasting boundaries require more than prepared sentences. They require a new identity, a life no longer organized around being everybody's rescuer, but around becoming a disciplined steward of what has truly been entrusted to you. You are a steward, not everyone's savior. Rescue absorbs ownership. Service strengthens it. Rescue creates dependence. Wisdom develops capacity. Rescue scatters purpose across endless emergencies. Stewardship directs your strength toward what has truly been entrusted to you. Refusing false responsibility does not mean abandoning love. It means loving without controlling. It means serving without erasing yourself. It means giving without financing avoidance. You can care about another person's future without becoming responsible for every decision that shapes it. But if you refuse to change, the cost will continue multiplying. Other people will remain underdeveloped because you keep doing what they must learn to do. Your assignment will remain interrupted because their urgency keeps outranking your priorities. Their pattern will continue, and your purpose will keep paying for it. So make 4 decisions today. First, identify one responsibility you have been carrying that belongs to someone else and return it clearly. Second, place an endpoint on one commitment that has remained open-ended for too long. Third, reserve protected time for an assignment you have repeatedly postponed while managing other people's crises. Fourth, prepare one sentence for the next predictable request. I care about you, but I cannot take ownership of this. I can support you in this specific way, and the next step belongs to you. You may feel guilty. Let the feeling pass without allowing it to govern you. The temporary discomfort of no can restore the lasting integrity of a purposeful yes. A disciplined no protects the commitments that deserve your full strength. Your value is not measured by universal availability. Your goodness is not proved by how much avoidable weight you can absorb. Your responsibility is to manage your time, energy, gifts, relationships, and commitments with faithfulness. You are responsible for what has been placed in your hands, not for controlling every outcome around you. Stop proving love by carrying what others must learn to carry. Stop mistaking exhaustion for faithfulness. Stop allowing praise for your helpfulness to conceal the abandonment of your own assignment. Use your strength to awaken strength. Use your wisdom to return ownership. Use your boundaries to protect contribution. Let compassion and discernment walk together. Before this day ends, establish one purpose-aligned boundary. Not tomorrow, not after the next crisis. Today, return what is not yours. Reclaim what is. And move forward with the clarity, courage, and focus required to fulfill your assignment.